Today is a great day to learn how to code. Welcome to the inaugural, the very first episode of Coding the Culp. Today we're going to be assembling a Raspberry Pi 4. Specifically, we're going to be assembling the Raspberry Pi 4 4GB kit from Cana Kit. The kit comes with absolutely everything you need to get started. The power supply, the Raspberry Pi 4, all the cables. You need 32GB SD card with the operating system already written on it. It comes with everything except a mouse, a keyboard, and a monitor. I love the Raspberry Pi for learning how to code just simply because it has everything installed. It's ready to go. It's got your development environment. It's got Python pre-installed. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's a very simple, very easy to use device. So I really love it for teaching people to code, especially beginners. I've got links down below. You can purchase a Raspberry Pi 4 kit or a 3B Plus. 3B Plus is also really good. It's just not quite as fast, not quite as smooth of an experience as the Raspberry Pi 4. But I've got links down below. I will tell you they are Amazon affiliate links. So if you click through and buy one, I get like $1. It doesn't raise the price for you, but it helps the channel out. Allows me to buy better equipment. I want to produce better and better content as time goes by, but the only way for me to do that is to buy better equipment, buy better software, and of course, practice over time. So if you click through and purchase one of those, it helps us out. In addition, if you would click like and subscribe to the channel, I would really, really appreciate it. So without further ado, let's go ahead, let's unbox this Raspberry Pi kit, and let's get started. So today we're going to be assembling this Raspberry Pi 4 kit from Cana Kit. This is a Raspberry Pi 4 starter kit. It's a 4GB model of the Raspberry Pi 4. I really, really, really like the Raspberry Pi 4 when it comes to learning to code. Main reason is it's fairly fast. It's pretty quick. One of the problems with some of the older versions of the Raspberry Pi 4, Raspberry Pi 3, 3B Plus, Raspberry Pi 2, is that they're not really all that quick. And what a lot of people want to do, because it looks like a desktop environment when you boot it up, is, especially kids, they want to fire up a web browser, open up 16 tabs, surf YouTube, play 4K video, and play Minecraft all at the same time. And the Raspberry Pi just can't do that. However, the Raspberry Pi 4 is actually pretty quick. It comes closest to an actual desktop experience of any of the Raspberry Pi 4s, or any of the Raspberry Pi models, excuse me. I like the 4GB model. It's a good trade-off between price and performance. The Raspberry Pi 4 2GB model is good, but it's still not quite as quick, especially when you're in that desktop experience, desktop environment, as the Raspberry Pi 4GB version. And the Raspberry Pi 4 8GB version is really nice, really smooth, but it's probably a little bit of overkill for what we're going to be doing during the course of learning Python, learning C, and doing things in the Raspberry Pi. I've got links down below for the Raspberry Pi 4 4GB model, the starter kit, and the 3GB model, the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. The 3B Plus is actually pretty good. It's not bad when it comes to a desktop environment. It's just not quite as smooth, not quite as fast, not quite as quick, and just not as good of an experience as the Raspberry Pi 4 is. The links that I have are all Amazon affiliate links, so if you click through, if you buy it, I get $1 or so. It doesn't raise the price for you, but it helps the channel out. And like I said, I really want to grow the channel, want to get better at what I do. Want to get better equipment. One of the first things I'm going to do is buy a better camera. I've got an old Sony Handycam is what I'm using right now. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. This kit's going to have absolutely everything that you're going to need to get started, except you're going to need a monitor, an HDMI capable monitor, and you will need a mouse and a keyboard. I like to use cheap wireless mice and keyboards. It uses up only one USB slot for the dongle, and they work really well with the Raspberry Pi. I've got a link down in the description of the video to a cheap keyboard for the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so let's take a look at what we have in here. Okay, so we've got a little thank you card. Little read me first card. Alright, this is our 32 gigabyte micro SD card. This has the operating system on it. One of the great things about the Cana Kit system is that it already comes pre-written. We don't have to worry about writing the operating system onto the SD card. All we got to do is plug this into the Raspberry Pi and boot it up, and we're ready to go. HDMI cable. Now the Raspberry Pi uses a slightly different HDMI connector. I believe it's an HDMI, it's either HDMI mini or micro. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. But it's a slightly different connector. So you can't use a standard HDMI cable. So this end right here, the small end, I can just pull it out. The small end will plug into the Raspberry Pi, and the larger end that most people are used to is going to plug into your HDMI monitor. We've got a fan. Raspberry Pi 4 tends to run fairly hot, so a fan really helps keep it cool. A micro SD card reader, just in case you need it to plug into your PC in order to write the Raspbian operating system. Like I said, the Cana Kit already comes with the SD card written, so we shouldn't have to do anything with this. We've got a nice little case. Raspberry Pi 4 power supply and some heat sinks for the Raspberry Pi 4. Once again, Raspberry Pi 4 tends to run a little bit hot, so these heat sinks will help keep it cool. And then of course we have the actual Raspberry Pi right here. So let's lay everything out and let's get started in assembling this. Oh, and then of course we have Raspberry Pi quick start guide. This will lead you through all the instructions you need to know. And oh, I didn't know we got one of these. Alright. This is a power switch. A little on-off switch for the Raspberry Pi. Alright, let's lay all this out and let's get started. Shouldn't need the micro SD card reader, so I'm going to lay that to the side. HDMI cable will need a bit. SD card. Fan. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the Raspberry Pi. This little thing says open here. You shouldn't need any tools. This kit shouldn't require any tools in order to assemble it. Alright, let's take a look at the Raspberry Pi. So right here on this end you have an Ethernet connector. By the way, the Raspberry Pi 4 has built-in Wi-Fi, so you shouldn't have to use the Ethernet connector. We've got 4 USB ports, a couple of USB 3 and some USB 2 ports. On this end, this connector here is for sound. We actually have 2 HDMI ports, so you can actually run dual monitors on this if you wanted to. And then this USB-C port on the end is actually used for power. We've got a micro SD slot right here. We'll put that in last once we have everything assembled. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put on our heat sinks. Let's take those heat sinks out and lay them out. You're going to get 3 heat sinks. Alright. Okay, so the first one we're going to apply is for the processor. This big one right here is the processor. And you're going to take the biggest heat sinks you got and it's going to go right on there. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to peel off the backing. I always hate peeling these things off. Seems like it always takes me forever. Oh, there we go. Alright. So you just take it, put it right on there. Oh, I missed. There we go. Still a little bit crooked. Let's see if I can do better. Okay. This long rectangular one goes on the RAM chip, which is right beside the CPU. See if I can get this peeled off. Maybe. Told you I always hate peeling these things off. Always seems to take me forever. I don't have very long fingernails. Okay, there we go. See if I can do a better job of applying this one than I did on the other one. There we go. And then finally, this one right here is going to go, you got two chips right here. One here, one here. It's going to go on this one right here. This one's the hardest of all three of them, I think, to get off just because it's so small. And I've got such bad eyesight that it's difficult for me to see. Alright, let's see. Oh yeah, this one's... Oh, almost got it. Almost got it. Ah, there we go. Alright. And there we go. That's what it should look like when you're all done. Maybe you'll do a better job than me. Mine look a bit quicker. Alright, next we're going to take a look at the case. If I'm not mistaken, this case comes in three parts. It's got a top, bottom, and a middle. Let's get it taken apart. There we go. And then the bottom. Yeah, there we go. Okay, what you're going to do, you're going to take the bottom part. Notice I've got the SD portion, or the SD card slot right here to the left, to my left. And same thing, SD card slot, no SD card in there. No SD card in there. You're going to take it, kind of angle it in just a little bit, and get it put down right in there. There's a couple, I don't know if you can see it in my bad camera, there's a couple little tabs, one there and one there. And so it just kind of goes just a little bit underneath those tabs, and it seats in there real nice. Alright, next we're going to put the middle on. You're going to line it up so that the ports for the Ethernet and the USB are facing to your right, and it just snaps right down on there. There we go. Alright, now we got to do the fan. And you know what? I actually should have done the fan before I did this, so I think I'm going to take it off real quick. There we go. Okay. So the fan, you got to be careful when you put the fan on, because you got to get the fan on the proper, what are called GPIO pins on the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so if you take a look on your Raspberry Pi, okay, and hold it up right here, you've got two rows of pins. Your fan, okay, you got a black wire and a red wire. I'm going to plug in the red wire first. On this second row of pins, oh, here we go, had a little trouble there. On the second row of pins, the row furthest away from me, okay, if I'm counting from my left, counting pins going down, I'm going to plug the red wire into the second pin from the end. Second pin from the end. Then I'm going to plug the black wire into the third pin from the end, right next to that red wire. So it's going to look like this. Make sure you get that correct. So once again, the second pin from the left should be the red wire, and the third pin should be the black wire. And it's on that second row of connectors, the row of connectors furthest away from me. Now, put this right here. I'm going to put the middle back on. There we go. Alright. Now, this right here, the fan, just snaps in place. And it actually doesn't matter whether you've got the Cana Kit facing in or out. It doesn't matter. So I've just snapped it in place. And then make sure you control the wires there and put this back on. Oh. So there we go. Had it going backwards. Alright, there we go. And we're all together. Oh. Like I said, control those wires. There we go. All together. All right. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your SD card out, and you might need a knife or scissors to open this. And grab a knife. Okay. All right. All you're going to do now is you're going to take your micro SD card and you're going to insert it right into here. One other thing, just so you know, you're going to insert it so that the label is facing up, and then push it right in. There we go. All right. Let's grab our micro SD or excuse me, our HDMI cable. I'll show you where that plugs in and where power plugs in. And we'll get this thing booted up and get the software installed. And I'll show you a little bit about how to navigate around a Raspberry Pi and the Linux operating system. One of the things that I found, one of the hang-ups for teaching people to code on the Raspberry Pi is just that the Raspbian, or the Linux operating system, is a little bit alien to people. They've never encountered it before, and so it kind of throws them for a loop. All right, let's open up the power. Okay. So what you're going to do, one end of your power goes into the power switch. There we go. All right. And the other end goes right here on the USB-C. Right there on the USB-C at the end. Now let's plug in the HDMI. Now it's important you have two HDMI connectors. I don't know if you can see on my cheap camera, but one's labeled HDMI 0 and the other's labeled HDMI 1, I believe. Yeah, HDMI 0, HDMI 1. You're going to plug it into the HDMI port that is closest to the power port. HDMI 0. And you're ready to go. So what you're going to do is you're going to plug in your HDMI into your monitor first. Plug that HDMI into the monitor first. Then plug in power. And then power it up, and you should boot into Raspbian. I'm going to hook this up to my capture card, and I'll see you in just a moment, and I'll show you what to do from there. Okay, I hope I'm recording this time. So I made a newbie mistake. I shot a whole video showing what to do with the Raspberry Pi and how to set it up, and it turned out that I wasn't recording, so I hope I don't make that same mistake this time. So here's the Raspberry Pi booting up, and yours might look a little bit different. I had to erase and rewrite the operating system, but I think it's pretty close. So what you're going to do is you're going to select the top one, the Raspberry Pi OS full. Also, you're going to want to change the language down here. It's currently set to English UK, and you probably, it just depends upon where you're watching this from, but I'm going to set mine to English US. Once you've done that, and the keyboard layout, my keyboard layout is US, you're going to click install. And just say yes. It's basically saying I'm going to erase this SD card and install the operating system. So I'm going to click yes. Now then, it's going to claim this is going to take just a couple of minutes. In fact, it says this will take a few minutes. In reality, this is going to take probably 10 minutes, I don't know, 15 minutes or more. So I'm going to stop recording, and I will see you when it's all done. I'll show you how to set up the Raspberry Pi. We'll install a bit of software, and I'll teach you how to get around in Linux, how to make your way and find your way around. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay, so we've written the operating system, and it's currently rebooting. One thing I need to warn you about is that it stays at 100% for quite a while. So don't get fooled and think, well, it's at 100%. I need to turn it off and restart. It's going to do it on its own, but it stays at 100% for quite a while. And then when you reboot, it's going to come to this. So it says before we start, there's a few things that we've got to get set up. So let's just go over here, click next, and set those things up. All right, you're going to set your country. For me, it's going to be, and my mouse is all acting weird here. All right, it's going to be United States. Nope, not Uruguay. United States. Like I said, the mouse is acting weird. Okay, so American English. My time zone is going to be Chicago. I'm actually located in Dallas, but Chicago is the same time zone. I'm going to use US keyboard, use English language, click next. So it's going to set up our location. Okay, you're going to set a password. So make sure you don't forget that password. Make it something you can remember. All right. Desktop should fill the entire screen. Okay. So my screen does have a little bit of a black border around it, so I'm going to adjust that. You might not have to, but you'll notice, well, you might not see it with my capture card, but I've got a little bit of a black border around mine. All right, we're going to set up our wireless network. So you're going to find your network that you're going to connect to. I'm going to connect right here. All right, this is your Wi-Fi password. And I am going to have to fix this mouse. It is really, really difficult to control. It is really spotty. All right. And so we have connected. Now it's going to ask us to update our software. So let's do that real quick. Yeah, that clock up there, 6:12, not the correct time right now. So it's going to update the operating system. That may take a little while. If it takes a while, I will cut that out of the video. But you'll see, for the most part, this is a lot like getting around in Windows. It's a little bit more bare bones, a little bit more stripped down. Up here, this is equivalent to the Windows Start button. Click here to open the Applications menu. And you've got all sorts of stuff already installed. In fact, the editor that we're going to be using is Genie, and it's already installed for us. Alright, it's downloading updates. Tell you what, I will stop and then I will come back after the updates are done, because these can take a little while. Okay, I've just rebooted, got all the updates installed. As a matter of point, just to let you know, it takes a good 20-30 minutes to do all the updates, or at least it did for me. And there are times where it looks like it's stopped. It's completely halted. Just let it go. Let it keep going. Eventually it's going to stop. It's then going to go through a couple things and ask you to reboot. Go ahead and restart. Go ahead and reboot. And during that reboot process, it may reboot 2 or 3 times. Just give it a little bit of time to finally come up to the desktop here. Now then, Raspbian, which is the operating system that the Raspberry Pi is running right now, is a lot like Windows in many ways. Many things you'll be familiar with. For example, you have a desktop here. You can change a lot about that desktop. For example, if I right click, I get a little menu. I can come down here to Desktop Preferences. And I can choose what image I want, or if I just want a solid color. So for example, let's see what this lasers right here is about. I double click there. There we go. Now I tend to like a very simple, very clean, very plain background image. So let's see what else we've got. Let's try this Raspberry Pi logo. And yeah, it's a little big because it's fill screen with image. What I really want to do is go from fill screen with image to this one to just center the image on the screen. And there we go. So I like that background. That's what I'm going to stick with. So let's learn a little bit about how to make our way around this Raspbian system. Over here, if I click here, it's a lot like the start menu on Windows, and I can access a lot of the programs that are already pre-installed. Now yours might look different, but I need you to make sure that you've got at least Genie installed. That's an integrated development environment that we're going to be using when we're developing our Python code and our C code. I like Genie as it's a really, really simple integrated development environment. What I mean by IDE is that we can write our code, edit our code, and run our code all from within that application. There are some really fancy, really nice, really neat integrated development environments that are really powerful and do a lot of stuff for us. I often find, though, that IDE will get in the way of learning for people that are new to learning to code. And so I like Genie because it's simple yet powerful. It does exactly what you need it to do, but not really anything more. And so I really like Genie. When you get more comfortable, you can graduate to better IDEs, or not really better, but more powerful IDEs, like Eclipse and things such as that. Thonny, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is also a Python IDE, and it's designed specifically for Thonny. And if you want to, you can use that one also. But what I want to do is I want to show you the terminal, because you're going to be spending a lot of time in the terminal when you're using Linux, which Raspbian is a version of Linux. So let's click on that. I've changed mine a little bit. I've made the font bigger so it's a little bit easier for you to see. So when you start up the terminal, what it shows you right here is your username. So your username is Pi, and this is the machine name @Raspberry Pi. You can actually change your username, and you can actually change the machine name if you wanted to, but we're not going to get into that. Then the very next thing shows you the directory or the folder that you are in. The tilde means that we're in our home folder. So let me do PWD. PWD stands for Print Working Directory. And it basically shows you where you are in your file system. These are like folders in Windows, if you're used to that. So we're in the home/Pi folder. The home directory contains basically all the directories of all the users on this system. And we're the Pi user, PI, so this is our home directory. Now then, ls is another command you need to be familiar with, which stands for list. And what it does is it shows you the directory. And in fact, if you're used to DOS, which most of you probably aren't, this command called dir does the same thing. But what ls does, a little bit different, is it color codes everything. The stuff that's in blue are other directories that we can go to. So I can change directories. So I can go CD, that stands for change directory, and I can go to downloads. And now you'll notice that the name of the directory you're in has changed to ~downloads. That means our home directory /downloads. And I can list, and there's nothing in there because this is a brand new, fresh installation, so there's not going to be anything in there. I can get back. I can go backwards in the directory tree by doing cd ... And there I am. If I pwd, I'm back to my home directory. Let me go cd music. I'm going to show you something else that you can do. So there's nothing in the music directory either. If I ever get lost in the file system, I don't know where I am, I can just enter cd by itself, press enter, and it takes me back to my home directory. Another command you need to be familiar with is how to make a directory. So in our home directory, we've got a lot of directories. Most of them are empty right now. But we're going to make a directory for our coding projects that we're going to be doing. So I do mkdir, make directory, space, and I just name that directory. I'm going to call it coding. How about I call it coding projects? Let's just call it coding. I'm going to call it coding. Now, when I ls, you can see that we now have the directory called coding. So I'm going to go cd coding. And if I do an ls, it's empty. But we're going to put something in it now. I need you to test out Python and make sure Python is installed properly. And the way we do that is we just type in Python 3. There's a few different versions of Python. Two of the most popular versions right now are Python 2 and Python 3. Python 3 is, of course, the latest version, and it's really the version that we should be learning. Everything's being essentially converted over to Python 3. So now you can press enter, and you should get this right here. It tells us that we're at Python 3.7.3, and we get a little prompt, and I can type at that prompt. This is actually called the REPL, R-E-P-L. And I can type in Python code or Python statements, and it will evaluate them and execute them immediately. So for example, I can do 2 plus 2. That's going to tell me it's 4. I can do 27 divided by 3, and that's 9.0. Now you're probably asking, well, why is it 9.0 and not just 9? We're going to get into that in a later lesson when we talk about floating point versus integer numbers. I can do something like this. I can say print hello world. Now notice a couple of things. Number one, I have a open parentheses and a closed parentheses, so everything's inside that parentheses. That has to be there. And I press enter, and there we go. It prints out hello world. I can press the up arrow key, and it instantly prints out the last statement or last command that I put in there. I wanted to show you something else. I can go back using the left arrow key. I don't actually need this space right here. Python is smart enough to know that we don't really need that space. And there it executes just fine. Now we're going to get out of this. Oh, there's one other thing I need you to check. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff with Pygame. Pygame is a game programming library specifically for Python. The way we can tell if it's installed is we say import Pygame. And it should tell us hello from the Pygame community. We now know Pygame's properly installed. If you get an error, make sure you typed it properly first. But if you get an error, we're going to have to install Pygame. But the good news is it's very simple. Now let's exit out of the Python command prompt, because we're not going to spend a lot of time in the Python command prompt. To do that, we type in quit and open and close parentheses. And we're back to our command prompt. Now, if Python didn't, or Pygame did not install, it wasn't installed, you can install it pretty easily. We're going to type in sudo pip3 install Pygame. Now, before I press enter, I want to explain this command. Sudo stands for super user do. Raspbian, Linux, has the concept of users. And some users have more privilege than other users. And there's the concept of the super user, the root user, that can do anything that they want on a system. Well, we're not logged in as root, and it's a good idea to never log in as root. Well, I'm not going to say never. Don't. Sorry, that was a bad thing to say. But to always log in as root, because you can really mess up your system if you type in something incorrectly and delete files or do something you're not supposed to. What sudo does is it lets us run a command as the super user. So it stands for super user do. Not all users have that ability. You have to have that privilege, and the Pi user does. pip3 is a package installer for Python 3. So we can install software and packages for Python 3. So pip3 actually does more than just install. But pip3, then we tell it we're going to go install this package called Pygame. We're going to press enter. Now then, for me, it's going to tell me that it's already installed. It says looking into indexes, requirements already satisfied, Pygame's already there. For you, it should install Pygame. And then when it's all done, you can go back and test it out by going to Python 3. And once again, typing import Pygame. And there it is. And then to get out, we're going to hit quit. Okay, so we've learned a little bit about how to navigate, how to get around, open up the terminal, check to make sure Python was there, which Python is installed by default on Raspbian. So I don't suspect that it would not be installed. And nowadays, Pygame's also installed by default, so I don't expect anybody would not have it installed. We're going to write a quick program. Now then, this is where we might need to install something. I don't want to use Genie, the IDE, yet today. We're going to use idle, IDLE. So I'm going to type in idle 3. I don't think that it's installed by default anymore. Let's find out. It is not. Idle is basically the default text editor for Python. We can install it with that sudo, super user do, apt get, apt, oh I can never remember what it stands for, advanced packaging tool. I think that's it. Advanced packaging tool. And it's a way that Linux, or versions, certain flavors of Linux, packages up software that we can go out and install. So we're going to say sudo apt-get, install idle 3. And if I did this right, it should install. We'll find out. Okay. Do you want to continue? Yes, we want to continue. We type in Y, and it installs idle 3 for us. Takes just a moment to install. And once it's done, and it's done, we can come up here. There's a couple different ways we can start idle. We can go back to here. And once again, this is like the start menu. And it's going to have all the software that we have installed on our system, or most of it. So if I come over here to programming, before I just had Genie and Thonny. Now I have Python 3, so I'm going to start it up from there. Okay, so what it does when I start it up initially is it brings us to that REPL, that Python prompt. And I can do the same stuff here. I can say print hello world. And there it is. I can do all the stuff from here that I did at the command prompt. But the thing I can do here is I can actually write a script, an actual program. So what I do is I go to File, New File. So now what I can do is I can actually write out multiple lines of code and run them, save it and run it. So watch this. I can say print hello world. And, that's kind of boring. It's just going to print out hello world. Let's do something else. Let's then say print goodbye cruel. And let's say goodbye world. Okay. Now what I got to do is I'm going to click run. So I come over here to run. And I'm going to run module. Notice there's also a shortcut key. I could have just pressed F5 and it would run the module. Now we have to save it. Source must be saved. Click OK to save. So now I want to save it somewhere, and I'm going to save it in the coding directory that we wrote. Notice our directory is /home/pi, and right here is the coding directory. I'm going to double click into that directory. So now I can name it, and I can name it whatever I want, but I'm going to call it something simple. I'm going to call it hello. It's automatically going to add the Pi extension, so I'm just going to click save. And there it ran. Hello world, goodbye world. And I can click back over here and I can press F5 and it's going to run it, and it runs it again. Hello world, goodbye world. So that's all fun. That's all fine. But let's do a little bit more. Well, first of all, let's go back to the terminal. In the terminal, we can type ls, and there's our hello.py program. Now I can actually run it from the command line if I wanted to. I could just type in Python 3. Whoops, can't type. Python 3. Hello.py. When I do that, it runs it. Hello world, goodbye world. Now then, there's another way that we can run this, and it's a little bit, maybe a little bit confusing, but I'm going to put it on there anyways. At the very top of our program, our Python script, I can put a special line. Don't worry about understanding exactly what this line does, but it's hashtag exclamation point, which is actually called the shebang, /usr /bin /python 3. And let me save it. So I'm just gonna run it. That'll save it. You'll notice it doesn't seem to do anything different. It still says hello world, goodbye world. But if I come over here to my terminal and type in ls, what we have to do is we have to make hello.py executable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say chmod, change mod or change mode, plus x, and then hello.py. Oh, let me show you another trick. So I don't want to type in the whole word hello.py. I can just type in he and then press tab, and it's going to finish it for me, provided there's no other commands or files that follow that same pattern, he, with a bunch of text behind it. So it figures out which one of those files I want to type there and finishes it for me. So I type in change mod plus x hello world, and what that does is it adds the executable tag. It makes it executable. Now when I type in ls, you'll notice it's in green. A green file means it's executable. Now all I have to do to run it is type in /hello.py, and it runs it. Let's do something else real quick before we quit. Let's print it out multiple times. In fact, let's get rid of the goodbye world part. So when I was a kid growing up, I learned a language called BASIC. And when you went into stores, like Sears or department stores, oftentimes they would have these displays set up with their computers on display. And old computers back in the 70s and 80s actually came with a built-in programming language called BASIC. Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. And so anyways, they'd have the computer turned on, and you'd go in there and you'd write a little program that would print out like your name over and over and over and over again, because it only took like a line or two, and then you'd leave. So anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to cause it to print out hello world, let's say 10 times. So I can do what's called a for loop, FOR, for x in range 10. Notice the colon. Now I've got to do something else here. Notice when I press enter, it tabs over. It indents. The print statement has to be indented. And the reason is, we're going to explain this in great length in a later episode, Python denotes blocks of code by indentation. What that means is the hello world belongs to this for loop. And what the for loop does is it says, hey, we're going to do this, whatever's indented, 10 times. And we're going to start counting from 0. So we're going to do it 10 times starting from 0. So it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And each time through the loop, it's going to do whatever we have indented. And in this case, it's just one little thing, hello world. So I'm going to press F5. Must be saved. And there we go. Prints it out 10 times. Hello world. Now then I can do something else. Watch this. I'm going to print X plus colon hello world. Now watch what happens. we get a error. Okay. I forgot. Let's do this. All right, here we go. There we go. So we printed it, and notice it started at 0. So here's what happens. We're going to do this 10 times. Whatever's in that's indented after the for loop, we're going to do it 10 times. X is going to be assigned the value, the numeric value of the current iteration through the loop. We start out at 0. So the first time through the loop, X is going to be equal to 0. And what this does, don't worry about this. We're going to talk all about it when we talk about variable types. This right here converts the numeric value, X, the number, into something that can be printed. Technically, it's kind of converting it into text, if you want to think about it that way. But once again, we're going to talk about that in a later episode at great length. So the first time, it's 0. Then the next time it's 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, all the way up to 9. Now notice it goes 1 short of our range value, but it still does it 10 times. 0 through 9 is in fact 10 times. Okay, so that's about it for today. Next episode, we're going to go into learning the basics of Python. One last thing I want to show you before we leave is how to shut down the Raspberry Pi. Don't just turn it off. You can corrupt your SD card that way. And so in order to turn it off, it's pretty simple. There's a couple different ways, but I'm going to show you the way to do it from here. All you're going to do is click on the Raspberry up there in the corner, come down here to log out, and then just click shut down. And it's going to shut down. So that was a little bit about setting up the Raspberry Pi, navigating around, and writing our very first Python script or Python program. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you got a little bit out of it. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. It's all brand new equipment, brand new software. I'm learning a lot. If you have any comments for me, any questions, put them down in the comments section. And I'd really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed to the channel. I'll have a new video here in a few days all about the basics of Python, an introduction to Python. Until that time, every day is a great day to learn to code. Thank you.